took a Bobby Bruce, took someone like him and brought him to the crib. You know what I'm saying? And really hung with him. Because if you heard Bobby Bruce in the beginning, the first thing Bobby Bruce says is, we got a connection. Me and Coach got a connection. He talking about he slept in his car. I just slept in my car.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's episode, we're going to be giving our commentary on the football series from Netflix, Last Chance U. I have Leland Johnson on the show with me today. And within today's show, we're going to hit on a few different topics, some of that being our commentary on Coach Brown. We're going to discuss leadership from the quarterback position. We'll discuss the Lady Miss Pinkert, competition, and then we'll delve in. We're just going to see where this conversation takes us, and we're just going to go down that road with our comments and our thoughts and with some objectivity from that point, but we are going to state our likes and dislikes. So Leland, what was your first thoughts on watching the third season of Last Chance U, where you have Coach J.B. Brown on, and they're in Independence, Kansas?
All right, first let's talk about the likes. Let's talk about some of the things that we were impressed with. I was really impressed with his ability to communicate with the athletes initially, to get them to get on board and understand that there was a bigger picture, coming from out of, different athletes coming from out of Division I situations could be really, really spoiled, going back to a situation like they were in. But I was really taken aback by his ability to get that caliber of athlete in there so fast on the field and get things to working. I like the collection of athletes he brought together. I think it was a good collection of athletes he brought together. I love the coaches that he had supporting him. That was great. And up until you got into the secondary phase of an athlete's maturation process in team sports or highly competitive sports.
One of the things I definitely liked about Coach Brown was that he had been through that field of landmines as far as making mistakes and having setbacks and transgressions where, he had been to jail. He had had a father that was an alcoholic. He went to a junior college where he basically played two seasons for, I think it was Compton Community College. And that's what I liked, him playing at a junior college. Then he had I think he had a pro tryout with an NFL team, and from there that led him to playing some arena football. So there was definitely some similarities in the path.
Yep. Well, shit, he was just like us. He was just like us.
I really appreciate how he got right into coaching after his career was over, So like you said before, I think, coming from certain inner city areas, you have to talk to kids a certain way. And sometimes when you look at a guy like a Buddy Stevens or you look at a guy like a J.B. Brown, if you haven't been to the higher levels of football, the way they communicate with athletes might be shocking. So if you're I'm asking you if you're listening to this, or I'm actually telling you, coaches talk like this. If you're going to approach this from a naive standpoint, whether you're playing junior college football or going to the higher levels of Division I AA and Division I, coaches talk a certain way. They will cuss you out, and sometimes they're speaking the language of the athlete. I'm not saying that it's always good, but in this particular instance, kids coming from the inner city, coming from Florida, coming from California, I think he was right on point to a degree.
You know what, man? I often tell parents when they start that watching language and watch how you talk around the athlete. I tell them, watch South Park. You watch South Park, and that's how your kids act when you're not around. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
If again, man, like you were saying before, if this is not for the faint of heart, man. These types of situations, It's called Last Chance U for a reason, because it's your last chance. It's your last chance at getting a chance to play on a highly competitive level, um, where you'll have available to you some of the best technology to take care of your body, some of the best information to help you get better at your particular sport. It's your last go, and if you don't take advantage of it, then you'll be like many other athletes. You won't have that opportunity. You know what I'm saying? Like I know, to play at a high level and in competitive sports, whether it's arena football and the NFL and the NBA, it's nothing like that feeling, man. It's nothing like that feeling when somebody wants to pay you for your services to perform.
One of the other things that I liked about Coach Brown was one of his phrases where he would say, "Your 5 stars don't mean shit here." And I think that's an area where athletes tend to get caught up at is their rankings, whether they're 5-star, 4-star. You see it from the kids that are transferring in from, say, a Florida State, an Auburn, or Virginia Tech, or Mississippi, where they might have made some mistakes. But I think oftentimes they forget how they got there. Because at the end of the day, they want to be back at a Division I school. So what I found in the series is definitely, and this is watching all 3 seasons, is that it puts you in a position where you have to humble yourself when you want to get out. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about Coach Brown? At this initial beginning, Leland?
Even though he had great communication skills in the beginning to lure the athlete in, I don't think he had great follow through. And I don't know whether, his time permitted it. I just think there were times where he could have took a Bobby Bruce, took someone like him, and brought him to the crib. You know what I'm saying? And really hung with him. Because if you heard Bobby Bruce in the beginning, the first thing Bobby Bruce says is, "We got a connection. Me and Coach got a connection." He talked about he slept in his car. I just slept in my car. I think that was an opportunity that was there to really, really connect with Bobby, and he didn't take advantage of it. And that was persist. That was a persistent thing with all the athletes. I don't think any of the coaches had a great follow through. You know what I'm saying? They did great to get the kids there. But, there are daily issues that you go through in your life when you're on campus. You already know that. I went to a junior college. You went to a junior college. You understand that feeling. Sometimes you're looking for just a shoulder to lean on. You know what I'm saying? That's all you're looking for. And I don't think that was there available for a majority of his athletes, even the mentors that was the supposed mentors that were there before he came along. I don't think they had much help in that area.
Right. I didn't actually go to a junior college, but I went to 2 different universities. What I can say is one of the things that I saw lacking at that college was there was nobody like a Brittany Wagner. And
Right.
I think we'll get to that. And then what I'm also seeing is, in the when they were in East Mississippi, you had the defensive line coach where he would talk to his players, he would get into them, but he would also tell them how good they were.
Yep.
He would build them up.
Yep.
It wasn't necessarily he was going to constantly cuss them out, and you could see that there was more of a brotherhood.
And he had respect from the athletes also. And dealing with those types of athletes, I often tell my kids here in Oregon, because they always talk about, oh, well, I'm going to go to a junior college in California. I'm going to go to a junior college over here. And I say, well, you really got to know how to navigate that terrain. And the first thing they do is they look at me. I said, you're going to a place where they have Division I talent, but those cats are delinquents, man. It's a reason why they're on that level. It's because they didn't have the grades or they just don't know how to conduct themselves. And 9 times out of 10, with a lot of them, it's about how they conduct themselves. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with your statement. You got to be ready for that terrain, because a lot of times what they don't tell you or what they don't show is it could be 5 or 6 kids living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and you're in there with your suitcases. And then 2, you're fending for food. Other people could be eating your food. Your shit can get stolen. People can go into your locker or whatever. So I mean, I know you just had a girl if and this is something that you don't even really hear about, a junior college on a basketball level, females. What? Tell me that story. Didn't you have? Did somebody steal $1,000 from one of your athletes or something? It was at her junior college.
Yeah, one of my athletes, she did well in New Mexico. She was a freshman of the year, India Fly. She did really pretty good, but in this somewhere along the way, the communication with her and the coach, well, the coach and several athletes, I guess it wasn't kosher. So those athletes decided to move on, and she moved on to a top uh, uh, program there in New Mexico, and she was saving some money, and oh man, she was saving some money to give back to her grandmother because in this transfer process, grandma had to come up with a lot of dough to in order for her to make the move. So what she was doing, and grandma didn't know it. So what she was doing was taking bits of her stipend and little money she would make, and she'd kick it to the side. And I guess she made the mistake of telling her friends that that's what she was doing. Her roommates that if that's what she was doing, she was saving some money. And lo and behold, the money comes up missing. You know what I'm saying? And I called her and, how you doing, baby? Not good. And they were just going through a situation where they were interviewing each player, and the coaches were, thinking about, having a search type of situation or searching each player's residence and finding out if they come up with the money. I haven't gotten a call yet from her stating whether she got the money or not. But those are the things that you deal with. Things like that you deal with.
It shows that when you get to a junior college, it's every man or every woman for themselves. And
Yeah.
we've been able to see on these 3 seasons of Last Chance U that it does get selfish. And then how can a coach bring, basically, you could call it a bunch of mercenaries, a bunch of rogues, whatever term you want to put to it. How could I bring these guys together to function as a unit, for the greater good of the team and to help them all?
You heard the coach. You heard the coach early on when you remember the part when the coach said, "Well, we didn't have the ability to bring in certain players to be competitive." He said because before we would have the ability to bring in 10 players. Then those 10 players we would bring in would be 10 knuckleheads.
Yeah, now they have unlimited.
Unlimited. He said now we have unlimited recruiting. Now we got unlimited knuckleheads. That proves my theory to my kids in Oregon. Man, knuckleheads are delinquents. But however you want to put it, that's what you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? You dealing with Division I talent. Talent is Division I, but that what's going on upstairs may not be at that level. And that's what you have to. You're dealing with a lot of immaturity. You're dealing with kids that again, talking about the mentor, either don't have a dad or a mentor that's really, really by their side to get them through all the shit that they're gonna go through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, now I want to switch lanes because looking at the commentary online from different YouTube postings and Google postings and things of that sort, I think it's really easy to throw a coach like Coach Brown under the bus when you're looking at it from an outside perspective. I think it's easy to throw a kid like the quarterback under the bus if you don't really know him. I know part of his story, is that he went to Florida State, he got kicked off the team for whatever reason. And then when you look at the dynamic of that whole season 3 episode, it would be easy to say this kid is an asshole. He has a lot of maturity to do. He has no leadership skills, and all of those things could be true.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is we get into, he obviously needs some help.
Yeah.
And when I look at it, I'm looking at it from a leadership I'm looking at it from a leadership perspective, because you're the quarterback, you're the leader of the team, and you have absolutely no leadership skills. That all might not be his fault, because I know he had his dad in his corner, and then he had I think he had a personal trainer, and then Coach Brown's mentor would help him too. So I think some things were lacking, especially when he went off to Florida State. When you go from California to Florida, those are things that we often discuss as far as staying in contact with our athletes on a weekly basis. And I think the gaps, or the lack of communication or the lack of the mentors once he started facing difficulties at Florida State kind of hurt him. What's some of your thoughts on his situation, Leland?
You know, something about the situation, it really pulls you in. And early on, I was listening to what caught my ears is, when they first introduced the parents, and I was looking at the mom and her, how her physical, just her mannerisms, and from what I got, I could be wrong. From what I got, I got a proud. She was proud, but I also got from her her mannerisms. What I got was, that type of parent that's so proud of their kid that sometimes they tend to overlook the things that are going to be more important down the road. How you address people, how you take criticism, understanding that you're not going to be the best at some times, or just knowing how to deal with the other athletes, and all those phases. That particular the quarterback was not. He wasn't a very, how can I say, uh, he wasn't astute in those areas. You know what I'm saying? And I really felt like the people who were the adults who were around him, they kind of let him down. There was a statement that he made about his dad. He was like, "My dad didn't come around until I was in high school," and that basically told me that he wasn't too comfortable with the relationship. Because if you were really comfortable with that relationship, that part of the relationship, I don't think you would expose, in the very beginning of a conversation with someone. You know what I'm saying? That's something that you wouldn't want to get out, or you would care about that individual so much that you wouldn't want people to get the wrong picture about that individual. And I don't think he gave a damn either or. He was just putting it out there. You can't blame him, but he was just putting it out there. My dad didn't come around till I was, da da da. He didn't in a negative way kind of say this about his mom, but in all those years that his mom was around her son, instead of preparing herself for the next situation, and the next situation after that, she was so into his success that she does what the normal parent does. It's more of what he does is it feels to them like a reflection on them and what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? And that can really screw a kid up. When you start being so happy with what your kid is doing that you don't see nothing, no faults in what he's doing, that can be a big mistake. In actuality, as he's doing well, you should be really looking at, really getting anal and starting to look and make sure that there aren't any things there. Um, Kind of what we was talking about a few minutes ago with Jazz. You know what I'm saying? He was doing so well. You kind of want to keep things at a cool mental place so that he can get through what he's getting through, without injury or any. But those things occur, and now we got to deal with that.
What I like about the series and what you're saying, it also gives parents some insight, because she could have been maybe she was a mom that never played sports at a higher level, so there were some things she was lacking. Now I can also agree with what you were saying, and it's clear that the youngster has some baggage. And a bigger question for me, and what I've been contemplating on, is like, if you're Florida State and you're doing your due diligence on your athletes, like, how do you miss that, or how do you just gloss over, you had to know at some point that there was a gap in the relationship between his parents.
I think those recruiters are at that time. They're in. It's all about the impress, impress, impress. You know what I'm saying? Let me impress. Let me impress. Let me impress. Um, I often said this going through Coyotes and Jazz's recruitment process, and it turned out to help me in Jazz's recruitment process, but I really didn't. And I think I may have did a little bit in Coyotes, but being straightforward and being honest with the recruiters and kind of breaking that hey, your kid is the greatest and we're going to take care of your kid and everything's great around here. You want to get past that. I want to hear, some of the, well, I had a kid that was here and it just didn't work out. Well, tell me why it didn't work out. You know what I'm saying? Because that situation or that problem might raise its ugly head with my kid. You know, um, it's very important for the parent to, if this is the way you are, you need to act like that child is your most prized possession. And you need to let that recruiter or recruiters know that when I send my child to you, you best to take care of them because I'm going to be checking up to make sure that you are. Some people may say, oh, well, you got to let them go. Sean, me and you talked about this several times, man. In this world today, that's not a place to just take your hands off and let your child go and be manipulated by a bunch of adults whose success depends on his success. Whether they're successful, it depends on whether they're successful. You see what I'm saying? And that's what you put in your child. You put your child in that situation whenever they start that recruiting process or the process of being recruited or playing on a highly competitive college level.
The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the parent to work through together. The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the coach to work through together. It was created in a sense and in a way to bridge the gap in communication between these parties and build a successful relationship dynamic. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/workbook or check out the show notes page and click on the link. And now back to the show. Yes, I was going to say, with where you're going, it shows that how you can be genetically gifted, you could be the best in your sport or sports coming up. But what tends to get glossed over is leadership development, character development, and then showing or teaching the athlete, one, the difference between stress and pressure, and then teaching them how to manage stress, and deal with pressure in the form of competition. And when you look at, and we're just talking about like the first
Right.
episode, kind of collectively everything, but I know we're honing in on the first episode. You can see he didn't know how to deal with stress, and he definitely didn't know how to deal with pressure. And those are things that me and you have discussed on many occasions as far as the things that we
Right.
teach our athletes, to be successful at that level, and how to manage a situation where there's probably four other quarterbacks like you that are coming in as freshmen. And then how do you deal with that? They're 6'4" too. They can run a 4.5, 4.4 42. Now it comes down to how mentally prepared you are and how can you minimize your distractions to handle your business in practice every single day. And it was clear that nobody prepared him diligently for those first few, weeks or semesters at Florida State for however long he was there. So I can agree with some people, but his results are not all his fault. That's for sure.
No, it's not because do you remember the time when his dad said something about? He said, you know, you have to learn through about your experiences. You have to learn through your experiences so that you don't have to re-experience certain things again. Um, his kid never learned in each situation. He never learned anything. I don't think he learned anything in that Florida State situation. He definitely didn't learn anything in that whole first season at Independence. Um, he actually really, really hurt himself, and very early on, he hurt himself when he tried to expose the coach in one situation when he was like, yeah, see, when I call the plays, that's what happens. And the coach was such a cool individual. Um, he walks over to the kid and goes, "Don't try to front me off, motherfucker. Don't do that. Don't front me off, motherfucker." You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Where I can see myself in that situation shutting the whole shit down. Excuse my language. Shutting it down. Hold on. Hey, everybody over here, let me explain something to you. I can see myself doing that. But he kind of, I don't know, maybe that's what he should have done to kind of let the kid know, this is where it's gonna stop. You know what I'm saying? I feel like they kind of let him go on with that little tedious bullshit too long, and it ended up morphing into something else by the end of the season. But they could have killed a lot of that in the very beginning. You know what I'm saying? And I think just the coaches, because the coach was like, "Ooh, this is a 5-star athlete. Ooh, I gotta," his chance of having his hands on a 5-star athlete, I think, was more important to him than the development or mental or psychological development of that particular athlete.
Yeah, I agree with you because I felt like he needed some competition. Where when you look at seasons 1 and 2, when John Franklin III was on there, they had the backup that he might not have been as fast as John, but he knew how to operate that offense, and he pushed John, and he also started. So I think, in his situation, he didn't have any competition that he respected and that would bring out the best from him, or just make him fold, because people do fold with competition. But he was just getting his way. And like I said before, I'll go back to the leadership development wasn't there. The mentorship wasn't there, and to this day, I don't think he has been signed by another school, going back to a Division I school. And it looks like he didn't play at Florida State. So maybe he has another year at a JUCO. Maybe he plays this year, or he's at another school.
That's because you got a physically mature kid that's immature in his mentality. I mean, you can see that in him. He tended to seem like he tended to try to exude confidence and show his maturity in certain ways, but at the same time, while he was trying to show that maturity, you could kind of see through it that was his immaturity that he was trying to cover up. You know what I'm saying? So
I agree 100%. And then being a leader and then being a quarterback on the team, your players have to like you,
yeah,
and I would almost bet 10-1 if you interviewed people from Florida State, they probably did not like him if he was acting like that,
I agree.
down there.
I agree with you. And you know what? This is where I was with it, and it ran across my mind a few times. I was like, he didn't have a football mentality to me. His mentality was more of a baseball player, and I think his personality would have fit better on a baseball field than on a football field.
I agree with you 100%, because I think we were discussing this yesterday. His first love and his first sport was baseball. He started playing football, happened to be good at it. But I really believe when you go back and listen to that, his dad made him choose
Right.
once he started living with him in high school.
Right.
And I think there's some long-term resentment there.
Yeah, you brought that point up. You brought that point up when we were conversating yesterday. And when I went back and I watched it again, because you brought that up,
Yes.
I think that's where that's probably Deshaun where the discourse or where the separation began. Right there.
Yeah. Because he made him stop playing. I think he ended up playing at 3 different schools. I know he went to 2 different high schools in California, then later IMG Academy, but then you're bouncing around, you're moving around, leaving friends. There's a social dynamic that becomes psychological at some point if there isn't an agreement. And it seems like they were never in agreement.
Oh,
It's different when you're in agreement with the student athlete
say it
and
one
the
more
parent.
time. Say it one more time.
There was no agreement between the two, because I know there was no agreement. So there has to be that. And when you go back and look at some of those episodes, you can see that wasn't there, and that's where that resentment comes from. And I would almost gamble 10-1 he'd rather be out on a baseball diamond pitching, because that's where his heart and soul is. I think he likes football, but he doesn't love it like he loved baseball, because there's a lot of physical contact, there's a different type of preparation. And I think when you look at this, it's kind of unfair to a degree, because you get touted to you're like a top 5, top 10 quarterback coming out of high school, and nobody had you get held to a different standard. The expectations are different, and we're not making excuses for them, but if you have to have mentors and coaches around you that are going to prepare you for how to act in the spotlight. And if you're listening to this, I don't want to get it twisted, because I don't want you to get it twisted, because I was in high school. I used to binge drink and party on weekends. When I got to Portland State, I used to smoke weed. I've experimented with ecstasy. I've been there, and this is one of the reasons why this is one of the reasons why the Sports Mastery Program was birthed, so I can help other athletes overcome those stresses, or not succumb to certain pressures, and just teaching them how to do things right on a social level. So that is why we're here today, because I've made those mistakes. It might not have been the mistakes that this kid has made, but I fucked up somewhere on a social level. And that's what makes our training programs unique, because we can do the physical training all day long, but if the social and the psychological, if those things aren't built in place, you're going to continuously have failures.
True. Just yesterday, a friend of mine, I got in touch with him on Facebook. He was actually my college roommate. The first school I went to out of high school, Los McDonald's Junior College. And I played basketball there. And me and him was talking, and he mentioned a coach that I played for at Alameda Junior College after leaving Los McDonald's. And after reflecting on that relationship, he was like, "Hey, Coach McHugh just died." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, man." And it hit me all of a sudden. And I said, that dude really believed in me. And I said to him something that I never probably said to anybody. I said, "I really feel bad that he believed in me so much. And at the time, I was so immature, and I didn't understand the opportunity that was set before me, or understood what he was trying to do." I mean, this dude, he would give me ride homes from practice. He was doing all the stuff that those folks were saying that Coach Brown was doing with certain athletes. He was doing that stuff with me, but because of my circumstances, I'll repeat, because of my circumstances, all of his attempts fell on deaf ears. And when I reflected back, I told my buddy, I said, I really feel bad that I didn't give him back in return what he gave me, you know. But if I had a mentor at that time, and I had somebody who could compartmentalize some of the things that I was going through in my life, I know for a fact I could have made it through. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have a mentor. I couldn't call my mom. I couldn't call my pops because they was going through their issues. Um, I may have had an uncle here, there. You just don't have people that you can fall on, that you can, gravitate towards in those trying times. And I know some people may say, well, you all you gotta do is sit back but when you going through some shit, you don't just sit up and just, okay, all the people I know, let me go down the line. This person, this person, this person. You don't do that. You know what I'm saying? We're creatures of habit, and we tend to deal with our problems the way that we're used to dealing with them. And at that time, for me to kind of like deal with my issues, I kind of like just close people off. I would just close them off and go to my little kitty corner, not say anything. And that was a huge mistake, because I wouldn't ask for help. Um, that could have been an important time for me to find a person that was going to mentor me. Um, I was talking to another friend, and I was telling him, it was weird how back then If I would have had someone like me back then, um, no telling what I would have done. But here was my example of a mentor. He was talking about one time they asked me as a youngster, I was probably 17, to go over to San Francisco on the pro-am to play in this pro-am game. So I said, yeah. So I went over there. Make a long story short, I ended up getting the MVP of the pro-am in Frisco. And the guy that I was busting, I was kicking his ass. His brother, Gus Williams, had played for the Seattle Supersonics, played for the Golden State Warriors. That's the type of caliber of talent that I was balling against, right? So after that tournament, you get accolades and people coming up to you and they're talking. And I had one guy named Norman Knowles, who was a really talented player from Oakland, played at Castlemont High School, ended up going to college. He walks up to me, he looks at me, he said, Leland, you got incredible talent. Incredible talent. If somebody shows you how to use your left hand, boy, ain't nobody gonna be able to hold you. I looks at him, I said, Norman, can you help me? And this is what he said to me. Grab a ball and start dribbling. That's what he said. Just grab a ball and start dribbling. And in a way, what he said to me was true. Grab a ball and start dribbling. But you don't tell a mind that has no direction, you don't give him that as a remedy to his problems.
Right. You were looking for more.
Because he's not going to figure that out. And because of my circumstances and everything else I was dealing with, my mind wouldn't allow me to see it the way I needed to see it. You know, I often told my buddy, I was like, he was like, yeah, man, we was when you guys were coming to that boys club, we would say this and we would say that and we would motivate you in this way. I said, yeah, but in the same token, as soon as we walked out of those doors, it was a whole lot of shit that we were successful to. It was a whole lot of shit that we heard and it affected us, and intentionally and unintentionally that kind of took us off our path for where we needed to go.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about once you started feeling a certain way, you would basically close off or go into your corner, and it's typical, when we get into discussing social intelligence and more importantly emotional intelligence, because when we get to feeling a certain way, our feelings might dictate our actions, but really we're looking for our thoughts to create our feelings that are going to help us, do the right thing or respond a certain way. I've been there before,
Right.
and what I've often found, and we've discussed this, is that when we're working with young people, we're talking about your future, your goal setting, overcoming fear in 7th and 8th grade. If
Yep.
we haven't talked about these things until a senior or a freshman in high school, it shows how much the student athlete can be behind as far as their decision making, how to
Preach.
express themselves, how
Preach.
to act a certain way. So that's one of the things that the sports mastery program is about. If I get you, I've found in my experience that the younger I start working with athletes, it heightens the chance of success. If we can start in the 7th grade, by the time they're sophomores, we got a nice flow going as far as them doing the right things. They're staying humble when it comes to getting letters. When the accolades start to come, they stay humble and they continue to work, and they don't stop working, because we've discussed goal setting. We've talked about fears. We've talked about making the most of setbacks, how to overcome an injury, or how to come off the bench. Being in situations where you're not favored and you have to wait to get on the field and shine, and finding your purpose, and really asking the tough questions to young people to really stimulate thought. And you can see in some of these situations that they're in a situation where all they do, if you do one thing, they're going to respond with A, where there might be B, C, and D to consider, and you're not getting that.
Right.
And what often happens
Right.
is, even though this particular kid, Malik Henry, he went to Florida State, they can say he got kicked off the team or he left. It was still a waste of money. It was a waste of time for both parties. Where,
Both parties.
my thing is like, how do you miss that? How could you have saved him? Maybe he couldn't have been, but those are questions that people ask.
Again, that's where I have to say this. It goes back to the parents. And if I was a recruiter, I wouldn't just recruit the kid.
Now, Leland, I want to say this before you go further, because we have student athletes, we have parents, we have coaches listening. I want you to deliver this in a way where, parents, if you're listening to this is not to beat you up. This is to enlighten you about this next level after high school and how vicious the monster or the machine can be and how you want to act and do research accordingly.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like I was saying, if I was a recruiter, I wouldn't just recruit the kid, I would recruit the parent also. Because you can find out about a lot of these kids' issues by just having conversations with the parent. You know what I'm saying? I think there's like I told you about my experience with Nevada. I think there's a level of when you first meet the recruiters, you want to impress. That's with anything. You want to impress. You want to be on your best behavior. But I think there's a process that you go through. You first initially meet this person, you impress them, by the way you conduct yourself and your mannerisms and stuff like that. But I think the relationship has to evolve past that in order for you to understand what you're getting your child into, or what you're bringing to that school. You know what I'm saying? You have to get past that first initial point of trying to impress someone. And I think after that, then what you have to do is you got to be real. You got to say to yourself and to that recruiter, you have to bring up some of the things that really bother you about this, or that could bother you about the situation. Let's say, you know, uh, being in Reno, okay? Being in Reno, I know there's a nightlife, or being in Las Vegas, I know there's a nightlife. So, what are some of the things that you're gonna do to make sure that my child, this doesn't become a part of his extracurricular activities? What are you gonna do for my child so that I know that he doesn't come back with a drinking habit? You know what I'm saying? Those questions need to be asked. A lot of parents don't ask those questions. When I was at Boise, when I took Coyote to Boise, in the football culture, drinking alcohol is like drinking water. So the first thing I told Coyote was, I said, hey, you're getting ready to go on this little visit, and one of the little athletes is going to take you out and show you around town. I said, look at me in my face. He looks at me. I said, no drinking, bro, because I know that's where y'all going with this bullshit, right? He comes back off the little night out, and he just looks at me in my face. He just stares. What's wrong? And he goes, how do you know this shit? I go, what? How do you know that these people are going to react the way they react? I said, all you got to do is sit back and look. Sit back and look and listen, and you'll understand what type of person you're dealing with. And what he was talking about was at that time there was one kid who was, and you got a chance to meet this kid because I think you came with me to the Oregon State recruiting process, and that's where we seen this kid. He was, you remember him? Well, when we went to Boise, he came along to Boise, and when came along to Boise, he got dead ass drunk that night. You know what I'm saying? And off of the conversation that you and I had with him, remember when he was telling us about Wyoming, that's where I determined, this is what type of person this could be. And this is what you have to look out for. And I told him that. And when he came back, that's what he saw. But it didn't take much for me to see that, Deshaun. And in my mind, I'm like, why didn't the recruiter see that? You know what I'm saying? Why don't you see what I see? And a lot of times I think the reason is because the pressure of winning, the pressure of keeping your job, the pressure of knowing that if I lose this job, I lose the ability to take care of my family or take care of myself, or I miss out on the opportunity of going to the next level, you know. But that's what you're putting your child into whenever they're playing on a highly competitive in a highly competitive college situation, whether it be junior college, Division II, Division I. If it's highly competitive, you really putting your child in a situation where there's going to be pressures put upon him by other individuals, and you have to understand that. And if you don't understand that, then you're putting your kid in harm's way.
I like how they had Brittany Wagner on those first two seasonings, and then you have Miss Pinkert. She's more of the English teacher, but I almost felt like after watching her and seeing her energy, her role should be elevated to where maybe she's teaching, but she also has like she also had like that mama bear type energy, counselor, therapist, all in one, where she was really her. You could see that her heart was in helping the kids get an education.
Yeah, she went in on Bobby because when I first saw Bobby, this is immediately what I said to myself because I grew up around individuals like him. He's the type of person that if you get into a fight, you on the street corner, man, that's the last person you want because he gonna be so down for a shit. He gonna be so down. But in the same token, I seen someone crying. I seen someone going, I'm in a place and I'm in a situation and I'm scared. That's what I saw. And even now when I'm talking about this, it's almost bringing me to tears when she looked at him and said, tell me three things about yourself that's impressive. And it hurt because he was going through what I went through. And he could not say one good word about himself, bro. That hurt. And when I reflected on what I thought about was all those grown ass individuals that entered your life up to that point who had let you down. Man, man. And it took her 1 second to go, hold on, tell me three things about yourself that's impressive. And the last thing was, the one thing he told her was, I ain't a quitter. I was almost in tears when I heard that, bro. I was so broken down. Wow, I was broke down. Because all I could think of was all the individuals, all the so-called mentors, all the people who took credit
Right.
probably for where he was to that very day. Um, it really was no help. You know what I'm saying? He really had no one. Um, maybe now because I hear just as of late, he had an incident where he left the school and then one of his mentors, I guess, kind of broke through or worked through some red tape, and I guess he's on his way back. But I hope that type of support continues because that's the type of support he's going to need in order to make it through that whole situation. Because he's truly an unfortunate kid who came up from a situation with no structure whatsoever. They showed it when they went to his house. There was no structure whatsoever. And you put him in a structured situation and say, here, go ahead and do it. He was scared, man. That was a scared individual. And I hope that somebody embraces him because if they do, he's going a long way.
Yeah, and before we close out, just thinking about his situation, when you look at a lady like Miss Pinkert, or you look at Brittany Wagner, it shows how when you have somebody that will constantly push you, they constantly showing that they believe in you and they're doing everything that they can to help you. It can literally change your life.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, with the kids that we work with, applying the dynamics of the sports mastery program, looking at what's going on with them socially, looking at what's going on with them psychologically, considering where they are emotionally and being receptive to that we've been able to do some incredible things even at our level. And if you're listening to this, we're definitely going further into the future. And what I see from episodes like this is very educational, and it's letting us know that we're going to always be in a position to where we can help young people. And that's what we love to do.
I agree. You had made the statement because I was like, when I mentioned it, I kind of was mentioning it in a way where I was complaining about it, like it was a problem. And it was interesting because your perspective was, well, that just shows that there's a necessity for people like us. And that just proves
Yes.
even more that in the future that people like us are really gonna be needed. And then, immediately when you said that, it was like, oh, okay, well, let me stop being angry. You know what I'm saying? Because then there really ain't nothing to be mad about, because knowing that you're going to be needed and knowing that you're going to make a difference and could make a difference in a kid's life in the future, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I guess now I just got to change my mentality into, I know I'm here and I know I can help. Now it's about putting myself in a position where I can help more than just one person at a time. Maybe I can help three or four at a time. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? Maybe I can help 5 or 6.
You can send a kid to a clinician, you can send them to a doctor, but who better to relate to them than somebody who understands the concepts of the clinician, who understands the concepts of the doctor, but I can go take a walk with you on the field, diamond court or track.
Yeah.
I can take a walk with you to the weight room. I can speak that language because I teach it every day. I know what you're going to have to go through on a strength and conditioning level every day. I know what you're going to have to go through from an X's and O's and whiteboard talks every day, where I can relate to that right now. We have to ask the tough questions. We have to put ourselves in front of the mirror, but there's a certain thing. There's sometimes that there's a gap because there's no relation there. And what we like to do here is really relate to the conversation. Sometimes we have to talk that language. Sometimes we have to walk that walk and talk that talk with them, to get their respect, because you can't speak if they've grown up in St. Petersburg, Florida, on a low socioeconomic side. They're probably not going to be speaking, the Queen's English every day.
Right.
At sometimes we have to come down to their level and speak the language that we know.
Thanks,
and
man.
and I don't look at it as a negative, because eventually that conversation is going to change once I get your attention, because we want you to be able to go out and function in the real world when it's time to apply for a college application, when it's time to go give a presentation at school or whatever.
Right.
But nevertheless, we're going to close out here. I'm telling you, you can look more. This is just our first commentary on Last Chance U. The next time we come on, we'll be discussing episode 2.